It is still dark when the engines start to rumble across the damp fields of eastern England. The date is January 1944. The air smells of wet earth, fuel and cold metal. Somewhere in the distance, tank engines cough awake, one by one, like large animals forced out of uneasy sleep. American soldiers pull their coats tighter, watching officers they no longer trust move between vehicles with stiff smiles and rehearsed confidence. Something feels wrong. You can sense it in the way orders are repeated twice, in the way men look at the ground instead of at their commander. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below. This is supposed to be the spearhead of the American Army in Europe. Instead, it feels like a stage set, built to impress people far away. And at the centre of it all is a general who, according to the men beneath him, should never have been promoted. Only weeks later, that same general will be quietly pushed aside, replaced by a man whose name will become legend. General George S. Patton. Loud, brutal, brilliant, and feared. But before Patton ever took command, someone else stood in his place, someone the Army promoted despite poor performance, broken trust, and a trail of quiet anger spreading through the ranks. To understand why this promotion happened and why it caused such outrage inside the US Army, you have to step into a world where image mattered as much as results, where politics could outweigh battlefield truth, and where losing the confidence of your men could still earn you another star. The story begins not in Europe, but in North Africa. It is February 1943, near the Kasserine Pass in Tunisia. American forces are new to combat. Many of the soldiers have never heard a shot fired in anger before this campaign. Their commander is Major General Lloyd Fredendall, a senior officer with years of experience on paper, but very little time commanding troops under real fire. Fredendall is not at the front. He is not even close. His headquarters sits nearly 70 miles behind the lines, hidden in a fortified bunker dug into a hillside. The soldiers up front joke bitterly that their general is fighting the war from a cave. As German forces under Field Marshal Erwin Rommel smash into inexperienced American units, confusion spreads fast. Orders come down the chain late, unclear and often contradictory. Units are split apart, armour is misused, and infantry is left exposed. When the Germans break through at Kasserine Pass, the result is chaos. American units retreat in disorder. Equipment is abandoned. Hundreds are killed or captured. It is the worst defeat the US Army has suffered in the war so far. The anger inside the ranks is immediate. Officers blame higher command. Soldiers talk openly about being sacrificed by incompetence. Fredendall's name becomes poison. He is known for barking orders over the radio using strange code words and nicknames, confusing commanders who are already under pressure. He refuses to visit the front lines, claiming it is unnecessary. To the men fighting and dying, it feels like cowardice. By any normal measure, this should have ended his career. In earlier wars, officers had been relieved for far less. But this is World War II, and the US Army is expanding faster than it ever has before. Experienced generals are in short supply. Admitting failure at the top is politically dangerous. And above all, the Army does not want a public scandal that suggests American leadership is weak. So instead of a court-martial or public dismissal, something else happens. Fredendall is quietly removed from combat command. Official reports soften the language. Failures are described as lessons learned. Responsibility is spread wide, diluted. And then, almost unbelievably, Fredendall is promoted. When word spreads that Fredendall is not only safe, but advancing, outrage simmers across the officer corps. Younger commanders who fought at Kasserine cannot understand it. Colonels and majors who watch their men die under bad orders feel betrayed. Promotion, in the military mind, is supposed to mean merit, courage, skill, responsibility. This promotion feels like a lie. The decision comes from the highest levels. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, Supreme Allied Commander in the Mediterranean, is under immense pressure. Washington is watching closely. Congress is watching. The American public expects victory, not excuses. Eisenhower understands that publicly punishing senior generals could damage morale and confidence back home. He also believes, perhaps too generously, that Fredendall's failures come from inexperience rather than lack of character. So Fredendall is reassigned to a training command back in the United States. On paper, it is a promotion. In reality, it is exile disguised as reward. But to the men who fought under him, the distinction means nothing. They see a man who failed upward. This is where George S. Patton enters the story. On March 6, 1943, Patton arrives in North Africa to take command of 2nd Corps. The contrast is immediate and shocking. Patton visits the front within hours. He enforces strict discipline. Helmets are worn at all times. Salutes are crisp. Weapons are clean. He fires officers on the spot for incompetence. He speaks in blunt, sometimes crude language, but his message is clear. There will be no more excuses. The same soldiers who cursed their leadership weeks earlier feel something change. Fear, yes, but also confidence. Patton is not popular, but he is respected. He shares danger, he demands results, and most importantly, he wins. Under Patton's leadership, 2nd Corps regains its footing. American forces push back against German units. The humiliation of Kasserine begins to fade, but the memory of Fredendall's promotion does not fade so easily. Inside the army, officers begin to talk quietly about what the promotion really means. They understand the unspoken rule now. Failure at a high level will not necessarily end your career if you are well connected and useful elsewhere. The army values stability and appearance almost as much as battlefield success. For professional soldiers who believe in merit and accountability, this realization cuts deep. The scandal is never officially acknowledged. No hearings, no public debates, no headlines. But within military circles, it becomes a cautionary tale, a reminder that war is fought not only with tanks and rifles, but with politics, personalities, and perception. As the war moves toward Europe, this tension follows the army across the Atlantic. In England, during late 1943 and early 1944, American units prepare for the invasion of France. Training is intense, pressure is enormous, and leadership matters more than ever. Men remember who led them well and who did not. When Patton is temporarily sidelined after the infamous slapping incidents in Sicily, many officers fear history is repeating itself. They worry that once again, image and politics might override battlefield truth. But this time, the army hesitates. Patton is too valuable. His ability to inspire fear in the enemy is real. Even when he is officially punished, he is never truly removed from the war. Fredendall, by contrast, fades quietly into the background. His promotion stands, but his influence does not. He never commands troops in combat again. To some, that is justice enough. To others, it is a bitter compromise. I'll make that the outrage over his promotion is not about one man alone. It is about what the army chooses to reward and what it chooses to hide. It exposes a fault line inside a rapidly growing military struggling to balance competence, loyalty, and public confidence during the largest war in history. And as American forces prepare to storm the beaches of Normandy, many officers carry that lesson with them. They know now that victory on the battlefield does not always decide a career. Sometimes survival in the system matters just as much. The anger did not disappear when the ship sailed for Normandy. It travelled with the men. By the spring of 1944, camps across southern England were full of American soldiers who had fought in North Africa or Sicily. Around cook fires and in damp barracks, stories were told and retold. And names came up again and again. Patton, Eisenhower, and always quietly, Fredendall. That might have not shouted, not announced, just spoken with a shake of the head. The story of the general who lost a battle, lost his men's trust, and still walked away with a promotion became part of the Army's underground memory. On April 15, 1944, as rain hammered the tin roofs of camps near Salisbury Plain, officers studied invasion maps under bare bulbs. The invasion of France was weeks away. Every mistake now could cost thousands of lives. For many commanders, the lesson of Kasserine was burned into their thinking. They feared not only German resistance, but bad leadership above them. They worried about being sacrificed by decisions made far from the front. This fear shaped behaviour in subtle ways. Junior officers became more aggressive about questioning orders. Colonels pushed harder for clarity. Reports were written more carefully, sometimes defensively. The Army outwardly looked confident and united, but beneath the surface, trust had cracks. Patton understood this better than anyone. Although officially sidelined after Sicily, Patton was far from idle. In England, during late 1943 and early 1944, he was given command of the fictional 1st United States Army Group as part of Operation Fortitude. On paper, it was a deception role. In reality, it was also a test. Could the Army afford to waste a commander like Patton? And more importantly, could it afford not to? Patton knew the answer. He trained relentlessly. He inspected units daily. He acted as if his army were real, because in the minds of the Germans, it had to be. But among American officers, something else was happening. They saw Patton working harder than ever, even when sidelined. They compared it to Fredendall's absence at Kasserine. The contrast was impossible to ignore. This is where the scandal deepens. The Army never officially explained Fredendall's promotion. No memo justified it. No doctrine supported it. It simply happened, and that silence mattered. In an institution built on orders and accountability, silence created suspicion. Officers began to assume the worst. That personal relationships mattered more than results. That senior rank protected its own. Eisenhower himself was not blind to this. In private letters during mid-1944, he expressed frustration with the lack of experienced commanders and the political limits placed on his decisions. He believed in loyalty, but he also believed in learning. In his mind, removing Fredendall from combat command was punishment enough. To many others, it was not. On June 6, 1944, when Allied forces stormed the beaches of Normandy, none of this mattered in the moment. The fighting was too intense, the cost too high. But leadership failures were watched closely. When officers froze or broke under pressure, replacements were swift. The Army, burned by earlier mistakes, became less forgiving at lower levels. Ironically, the harsh accountability applied most often to those without stars. As Patton returned to active combat command in August 1944, leading Third Army across France, his success reopened old wounds. His rapid advances, bold decisions, and relentless pace made one thing clear. Aggressive leadership saved lives in the long run. Hesitation killed them. To every mile Patton advanced was an unspoken indictment of past caution, of bunker headquarters, of distant command, of leadership that avoided risk at the cost of blood. Meanwhile, Fredendall remained in the United States, overseeing training units. He performed his duties adequately. No scandals followed him. No redemption story emerged either. His career drifted quietly toward retirement. Official records showed a promotion. Unofficial memory showed a failure. By late 1944, the Army itself began to change. After the Battle of the Bulge in December, accountability tightened even further. Eisenhower relieved commanders more quickly. The margin for error shrank. The lesson of Kasserine, delayed but learned, finally took hold. Inside staff colleges and after-action reviews, Fredendall's name was rarely spoken aloud. But his example hovered in the background. Instructors emphasized forward command, clear orders, shared risk. They warned against isolation, against fighting wars from maps alone. The outrage that followed his promotion never became public history, but it shaped professional military culture. Officers who rose after the war carried this memory into Korea, into Vietnam, into Cold War doctrine. The idea that promotion without merit corrodes trust became an unspoken truth. Patton did not live to see this legacy fully form. He died in December 1945 after a car accident in Germany. But by then, his reputation had eclipsed all others from his generation. He became the symbol of battlefield leadership, for better and worse. And in that shadow, the story of his predecessor became a warning. Why was Patton's predecessor promoted? Because the Army feared scandal more than silence, because it needed experienced names, even flawed ones, because wartime politics demanded stability, and because admitting failure at the top felt more dangerous than hiding it. But the cost of that decision was paid in trust that took years to rebuild. When modern historians look back, they often focus on battles and heroes. But the real story here is quieter and more uncomfortable. It is about how institutions protect themselves, about how careers can survive disaster, and about how soldiers remember who stood with them when the shooting started. You can almost feel it now, standing in those muddy fields in England in 1944. The cold wind, the rumble of engines, the unspoken judgment of men who know the difference between a general who leads and one who hides. That judgment, more than any official record, is why this promotion became a scandal, and why, even decades later, it still outrages those who believe leadership should be earned, not preserved. If you want more content like this, subscribe now and comment below.